What's up, everybody? This is Josh here from Inside Wrestling Truth, where we cover everything pro wrestling. Today, I'm making a video about George Scott, the legendary George Scott, that passed away Monday. I felt like it was a video that needed to be made and a subject that needed to be covered. Um, George Scott did a lot for professional wrestling. I don't expect to get a lot of views on this video because most of y'all probably don't have no clue who George Scott is. But what I'm going to do here today is I'm just going to cover this video about George Scott and kind of tell you a little bit of what he did in the wrestling business and what he kind of put his finger on and left in the wrestling business. The first time I ever really heard about George Scott was when he was the booker for Jim Crockett Promotions. That's what a lot of people know George Scott for, but he did a whole lot more in professional wrestling behind the scenes than that. With his passing, like I said on Monday, I just really wanted to cover the legendary George Scott. Like I said, George Scott was the head booker for Jim Crockett Promotions. When Jim Crockett Promotions closed, he then went to New York and worked for Vince. He helped build WrestleMania 1 and 2. I know a lot of y'all don't know that. He booked a lot of the cards for WWF Saturday Night, the WWF Saturday Night Main Event, Primetime Wrestling, and WWF Superstars. George Scott was behind a lot of that. A lot of the shows that guys my age grew up watching, George Scott was behind all of that. In the 60s, I believe it was in the 50s and the 60s, maybe early 70s, he was actually a wrestler. He actually wrestled first. He was out of Canada. He worked in the NWA, the AWA, and Stampede Wrestling. He was in a tag team called the Flying Scots. I know a lot of y'all don't know. You're probably like, what the fuck is he talking about? But back in those days, they were a very good tag team, and they held several tag team titles. Some guys' careers that he got helped jump started in Jim Crockett Promotions were like Wahoo McDaniel, the Super Destroyer, Johnny Valentine, Ricky Steamboat, Jimmy Snuka, Rowdy Piper. He's really the one that got Ric Flair going. I mean, I could go on, but just George Scott helped a lot of guys, a lot of Hall of Famers get their careers started and get them rolling for them. It's just stuff like that shows you the importance of an individual like George Scott. George Scott was one of the first guys when he was in the WWF to stop all the drug use. He's actually the one that come up with the drug testing process program, whatever you want to call it. He's the one that started that. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people say it was Vince, but it was really George Scott who was behind it. The disaster that was soon to become. George Scott stayed in the WWF for a little bit. He left in the 80s. A lot of people say, he left due to Hulk Hogan. Because of Hulk Hogan's, Hulk Hogan had the pirate trip or whatever and got George Scott fired. But that's the reason they say he left the WWF. But yeah, he did a lot for the WWF. Everywhere he went, he was a hell of a booker, a hell of a mind, and I really, really do think he's underrated. And a lot of the older wrestling fans will appreciate this video. I think it was in '89 or '90. He started his own company in the Carolinas. It's called South Atlantic Pro Wrestling. And it closed down in like '94, '95. But once again, he was still in the mix, still in the business, still had a passion for what was going on, you know, still trying to make things happen. And I think that was cool, you know. He's a two-time AWA Tag Team Champion and a one-time NWA Tag Team Champion. So he knows, George Scott knew, you know, what it took to be successful in the business. And that's why he created stars like Flair and Steamboat and Piper and so on and so on. George Scott is very underrated, never talked about. He's an innovator in the business. But this past Monday, January 20th, we lost George Scott with a battle of lung cancer. And, you know, I just want to say rest in peace to George Scott, and my thoughts and prayers go out to his family. And me here at Inside Wrestling Truth, I really respect and appreciate everything that he brought into the wrestling business, everything he did for the wrestling business, and all the memories that he has left us with. And like I said, rest in peace to George Scott. That's really all I got to say about George Scott on this video. I know a lot of you will probably be like, who the hell is George Scott? You know, I don't care, you know, whatever. But me as a pro wrestling fan, anybody that touches the business and does positive things for the business and leaves a mark on the business, I'm going to respect and make a video for. But that's all here from Inside Wrestling Truth. Like I always say, get your money and pay your bills. Peace.